Good morning. Saturday, May 23rd, 2020. Pastor Ron Jetter, Immnauel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington. It was over 2 months ago that the Yakima County Health Director issued a stay-at-home order for all of Yakima County residents, effectively shutting down public worship for our church in Grandview, which is not quite close enough to Benton County to be in Benton County. Otherwise, we might be a little more relaxed by now. It's going to be a while for us. At the time, though, which was actually 3 days before our Governor Jay Inslee issued his stay-at-home order, Sue and I went to our freezers. Yes, we have more than one. There's the refrigerator that has a freezer upstairs, the refrigerator that has a freezer downstairs, and then there's just the freezer in the garage. We looked at all the things that could become entrees. We, as Americans, follow a pattern that's typical of America, Canada, Australia, and Great Britain, the 4 English-speaking countries of the world, that follow a meal pattern that says you build your entree around your meat. So that's what we inventoried. We then spent the last now 8 weeks making menus based on that, and each week we have successfully added to it with an Instacart order or maybe a short trip to the store every other week. But we've really had to buy very little in the way of entrees. Well, the freezer's now down to pureed peaches from last year, pureed apricots from last year, frozen prunes from last year, chicken stock, turkey stock, beef stock, leftover cowboy casserole, pot stickers, and a handful of other kinds of things that could be add-ons, but nothing to really build a whole meal around. So now we're having to actually think, for the first time in 8 weeks, what do we want for this week? So we're piecing together meals day by day this week, which we haven't had to do, and we've got to get back into that routine of planning out our meals, because it's a lot easier not deciding at 5:30 what you're going to eat in 45 minutes. It's a lot easier deciding on Sunday what you're eating all the way through Friday. Saturday, then we like to do takeout from support one of the locally owned restaurants. Acts chapter 10, again, one of the great stories this week. I've looked at really amazing stories from the book of Acts. Stories that are really standalone stories that give us snapshots into that early church. And this one's all about what to eat. Keep in mind the disciples were Jews, so their diet is based not on what they eat, but based on what they must not eat, what they must avoid. There's this whole philosophy known as kosher, and I don't really have time to get into it. Maybe next week I'll spend a session on kosher, the concept of kosher, which does include some hygiene that was thousands of years ahead of its time. Quite amazing. And part of that then involved food safety. Today, however, food safety is a different kind of thing. We have different ways of ensuring food safety. We have inspections, we have different methods, and we also then have additives, which are maybe good or bad, depending. But there are things that a Jew could not eat. If it's a fish, it swims and has scales. It belongs in its element. If it's not a fish, it doesn't swim. That means it's not in its element. It shouldn't be crawling if it's in the sea. It should be on land. Therefore, if it's crawling in the sea, you cannot eat it. Shellfish, they either crawl or bury themselves in the sand. Crab, lobster, all those kinds of things, they don't fit their order of creation. They're unclean, unkosher. Think of that. What's another synonym for unclean? Dirty. You're not going to eat something that's dirty, are you? You drop your cheese sandwich in the mud, you're going to pick it up and eat it? Well, I mean, the 3-second rule may apply on a clean floor, but not if it's covered with dirt. That's the way they thought of certain kinds of foods. Pork. You could eat certain animals that had a hoof, certain animals that had a hoof you could not eat. And pork was one of those that was absolutely forbidden. So pork and shellfish are right out for them. Peter is traveling in the Gentile territory. He's in the town of Caesarea named after Caesar, of course. So it's a town where the Romans have a cohort, and one of the palaces of Pontius Pilate is in Caesarea. And it says in chapter 10, verse 1, in Caesarea there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion of the Italian cohort, as it was called, a devout man who feared God with all his household. He gave alms generously to the people and prayed constantly to God. One afternoon about 3 o'clock he had a vision in which he clearly saw an angel of God coming in and saying to him, Cornelius. He stared at him in terror and said, What is it, Lord? He answered, Your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa for a certain Simon, who's called Peter. He is lodging with Simon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. When the angel who spoke to him had left, he called his 2 slaves and a devout soldier from the ranks of those who served him. After telling them everything, he sent them to Joppa. Okay. Centurion. He's in the territory that is frequented by Jews and other religious people, Samaritans, and somehow he doesn't just worship the Roman gods, the pantheon, have a favorite god for this special thing. He understands that there is one God, and he has a heart for this God, much as did the Ethiopian servant, the court servant. And the centurion, he's in charge of a retinue of soldiers that are stationed there at the Roman fortress in Caesarea. And an angel spoke to him and says, "Send for Simon, who is called Peter." Okay. So now we get the other side of the story, starting in verse 9, where it really gets interesting. About noon the next day, as they were on their journey approaching the city, Simon Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat, and while it was being prepared, he fell into a trance. So he's up there, I don't know if he's catching rays, but he falls off, drifts off, and he's going to have a vision. He saw the heaven opened up and something like a large sheet coming down, being lowered to the ground by its 4 corners. In it were all kinds of 4-footed creatures and reptiles and birds of the air. Then he heard a voice saying, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is profane or unclean." The voice said to him again, a second time, "What God has made clean, you must not call profane." This happened 3 times, and the thing was suddenly taken up to heaven. Apparently then Peter woke up, because in the next verse, verse 17, while Peter was greatly puzzled about what to make of the vision he had seen, suddenly men sent by Cornelius appeared. They were asking for Simon's house and were standing by the gate. They asked whether Simon, who was called Peter, was staying there. While Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Look, 3 men are searching for you. Now get up and go down and go without hesitation, for I have sent them." What is this about? Well, the centurion is a Gentile. His slaves and his lieutenant are Gentiles. And they want to know about the gospel. They want Peter. Simon Peter is still a Jew. He's a Christian, but he's still a Jew in his own mind. They want Peter to come. And in Peter's mind, well, he's just not quite sure that he personally has been called to extend the gospel to Gentiles, because they are profane, they are unclean, they are not part of the chosen ones. And so he has this vision. He's hungry, and the vision takes the form of food. Okay, there are all the animals, and in Peter's dream, he sees animals, some clean, some unclean, and a voice saying, "Go kill and eat, Peter, meat." And Peter argues in this dream, saying, "No, I can't. Those are unclean things. I've never done that. I've never had pork. I've never had Canadian bacon on my pizza. I've never had a ham and Swiss sandwich. I've never had lobster bisque. I've never had crab louie. I just have not done that. I am a kosher Jew? And the voice says, I've declared these things clean. And then it says it happened 3 times. Why 3 times? Peter denied Jesus 3 times. After the resurrection, 3 times, Jesus said, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, you know I do. Feed my sheep, feed my lambs, tend my flock. 3 times. I guess it's because it takes that long to get through that thick fisherman's head. What God is trying to do. What God is saying, Peter, it's not about food. It's not about animals. It's about people. Don't you dare call any other human being unclean or profane. Now get up and go with these Gentiles and go out and start converting Gentiles. They're God's children. The gospel is for everyone. Quit putting up borders. This is like telling a vegetarian, now go and eat meat. This isn't about telling someone who has eaten everything, stop eating that, which is not easy to do either. This is telling someone who says, no, I have an aversion reaction to that, or I can't do that, or I have moral reasons or dietary reasons. I can't do that. And all of a sudden they're told, yeah, you need to do that. You need to do that to be faithful to God. You need to somehow expand your world, taking the words unclean out of your vocabulary, especially where it applies to another human being. What a great story. Thanks. See you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. and live Zoom worship.